Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Nozu for you here, and some of you might have missed it because there's been a lot going on in the past week or so with Valentine's Day and everything else, but there are more submarine changes coming. Yes, 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 Wargaming is still trying to shoehorn submarines into World of Warships, despite, well, I don't know if it's a majority, but a fair amount of players not wanting anything to do with submarines, anything to do with them being in the game whatsoever. But you know, when you put so much money and so much effort into making something work, you're not going to give up on it. And obviously, Wargaming is going to do everything possible to make sure that submarines are included in the game and they are utilized. Now, there's a closed test coming up. Again, there are more changes in submarines. It doesn't seem that they can just find a happy medium, a balance where submarines are working in a way that actually supplement the gameplay and feel at home in the current game. I mean, we've played it. We've seen them. They're just, I don't know. In my opinion, they just don't work. But you know what? They're coming again. Closed test. So I'm just going to go over the changes and what I think about them. This is largely because of the way that submarines interacted with surface ships, and Wargaming feels that they don't interact properly, obviously. They feel that it's too hard for surface ships to detect and do anything about submarines. And, you know, to an extent, I do agree. It can be very challenging having submarines around, especially if you're in a slower ship like a battleship. But the problem is, a lot of the changes I'm seeing don't do anything to affect the larger issues that I feel with the gameplay. So, I mean, they do little changes, and maybe that's the plan here. The plan is to just slowly change things until they feel they're at a point where they think things are going to work. So, anyhow, these are the changes, and, you know, there's a few of them. So, it's going to be interesting to see how these play out in the future. So surface submarines, now surface ships have new ways of keeping track of submarines, according to World of Warships. Sonar pings emitted by submarines are now visible to surface ships and can be used to determine their approximate position. And I think this is a good idea. It should be that way. Sonar pings travel through water, and obviously a ship is going to hear them. So it would make sense that it leads right back to the submarine instead of just being this magical thing that comes absolutely out of nowhere and you don't know what's going on and where it's hit. So I think that's a move in the right direction. Also, when submarines are hit, an oil leak will rise to the surface, giving opponents a more precise reading on its movements and location. That's a little more true to life right there. So I think that's kind of a cool addition. I think that's going to help a lot. I think that's something that will aid players, so I'm glad they're doing that as well. If you have planes and they manage to hit the submarine, you know, an oil slick's going to rise, so you have an idea where they're at, and other ships in the area, you know, have a general idea where they're at, so destroyers can, you know, kind of gang up on it, fly to the area, and do whatever they're going to do. So I think that's a good move there as well. Another change, depth charge airstrikes reload faster and have a 100% chance to cause floodings on submarines. That's another move that I kind of like too. And that'll make submarines think twice about what they're doing. So that's going to deal major damage to submarines. However, submarines can only have one flood active. That makes sense as well. I mean, if you get hit by multiple airstrikes, it'd be unfair to have 2 or 3 floods on you. So that does mitigate things right there. Surface submarines have the ability to detect a ship that is firing in or behind smoke, but submarines at periscope depth can only detect the ship at the assured acquisition range. Right there, I don't know how much of an effect that's going to have. I don't know that I necessarily agree with it. I don't know that I necessarily don't. We'll have to see how that one plays out. Changes to submarines. Now, there are some changes to submarines as well, because obviously they feel that while surface ships are having a hard time playing against them, submarines are also having a hard time playing against surface ships. So don't the 2 penalties offset right here? Doesn't that kind of negate things? I don't know. Anyhow, submarines can now choose between 3 depths: surface, periscope, and max depth. making the decision simpler for the sub commander and easier to interpret for opponents. Subs still can choose at which depth they want to be. So 3 depths right there: surface, periscope, and max depth. Nothing in between. You're either one of those 3 things. There are 2 types of torpedoes now. You have acoustic homing torpedoes, which are more consistent hits but do less damage, and conventional torpedoes, more difficult to hit but higher damage. And I'm going to touch on that because I hate homing torpedoes with a passion. The damage control party now has a limited number of charges, forcing sub-commanders to be more cautious. Using all the charges at the beginning of a battle means that at the end you'll have no answer to oil leaks and flooding caused by depth charges. So, you know, that's the same as some battleships out there. You really have to utilize how you want to use those damage control parties. So I kind of like that as well. Now, the acoustic homing torpedoes, I have a problem with those and always have. They say these torpedoes sacrifice damage for a better chance at hitting their targets thanks to the homing mechanic. First hit on a target with a sonar ping activates homing. The second makes the homing more precise. So nothing's really changed right there at all. The difference is sonar pings are available to opponents within 8 kilometers, so not perpetually. You know, you have to be within 8 kilometers to see those. So I think some of these torpedoes have a 10, 11, 12 kilometer range. So if you're outside of that, you know, you're basically getting stealth fired upon with torpedoes. Each torpedo will respond to the last successful ping right there. Targeted ship can nullify an active ping by activating damage control party. Nothing different there, and that's the thing I want to touch on because I absolutely hate that. Especially if you're in a battleship that has a limited amount of damage control party charges, which there are some out there. This is a big kind of kick in the pants for battleships, because if you're pinged and you know that these torpedoes are coming and you got to shake that, you're basically using a damage control party right there, and you've limited yourself in what you have and to be able to use it against other ships that are firing at you, like HE. So I've always been against that. I really haven't liked that at all. It doesn't seem that they care, though. I honestly hate homing torpedoes because I feel they really don't fit in with World War II or the game itself. I think it's a very arcadey mechanic right there. I'd much more like to see conventional torpedoes be the primary go-to, and you fire torpedo spreads, maybe make them harder to detect by enemy ships, make them go faster. I don't know. Focus on conventional torpedoes. Take away the incentive to use pings and everything else. Make it high skill, high reward, where if you land a hit, it's going to do a lot more damage. You know, maybe make them deep water or something like that. But it says conventional torpedoes are the second type available. You cannot home in on the target, but deal higher damage similar to destroyers. Range and speed are decreased, which doesn't make sense. I feel that should be opposite for a conventional torpedo, which is harder to use, while arming distance and detection range by enemies is increased, which I think is also silly. You know, the detection range should be a lot less for conventional torpedoes. So, there's changes here. Some of them are good, but I feel they've got some of these things backwards, especially the torpedoes. I feel like they should be opposite of what they are right now, and honestly, I love to see homing torpedoes get removed completely. I do not like them whatsoever. And the sonar pings, while that's nice, 8 kilometers, that's still not going to do a lot of good for battleships and most cruisers as well. Really, all that's going to help is destroyers. Now, hopefully, all ships will be able to see it, but I don't think that's how it's going to work. It says sonar ping detection works differently from torpedo detection. Each ship can only see pings within its own detection radius. So, are all ships going to be able to see this sonar ping within 8 kilometers? That would make much more sense, and that would allow all destroyers to kind of flood to one specific area and try to attack these submarines. But I don't know. We need to know a little more about that. The airstrike things, 100% chance flooding. I think that's a good thing. But ultimately, I don't know. I still feel that submarines are a faulty mechanic, and we're 3 years into testing now, 2 or 3 years, and I feel like we're not any closer to where they should be than where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And in fact, I don't feel like, despite all these changes, any progress has been made at all, which, again, that belies a huge issue right there, and a bigger issue. Should submarines really be in this game? And I think a lot of players have their own opinions of that. I certainly have my own opinion. I mean, I do hope we get to a point where they can coexist and actually make sense and work well, but, 3 years in again, I'm not really having a lot of confidence right here. Want to know what you think about these changes, though, and submarines in general. Let it all out. Let me know in the comment section of this video. Hope y'all are doing wonderful, though, and I'll catch you all later. Zoop out.